All right, fellas, let's jump into the keys to victory for this game. And we're going to begin, obviously, as we always do, with the Notre Dame offense. And, when I look at this game, guys, it's this is the side of the ball. If you were to say one side of the ball is facing an opponent that like all the stuff we talked about in the first section, I'm most worried about it on this side of the ball, if we're going to be honest. Because, like, when I watch the Florida State offense, and they're really bad. Like, they're bad at receiver. They're bad on the offensive line. They're not good at quarterback. They're just not good. When I look at a lot of its injuries and guys that they thought were going to be good aren't good. I don't know what's going on with the offensive line. Defensively, it's a little bit of a different story. I just don't think they're playing as well as they should, but I still am like, man, their ends are still really athletic. Those two D tackles, when they want to play, they're really good. Their corners are pretty good players, and Shaheem Brown's a good football player. Like, they're banged up. Obviously, no DJ Lundy, and they've had some injuries in some other spots, but this is still a team that you look at. If Notre Dame doesn't come to play and they're not focused and they don't, do all the things they need to do, this is the side of the ball where I'm most concerned about it manifesting into issues for Notre Dame. And so that's why key number one is going to be what it always is, but this ties into what we just got done talking about. This is the side of the ball to me that more than anything can put this game away in a hurry. It's the Notre Dame offense. So starting fast is key. You talk about, Ryan, you were talking about it's a game of momentum, and Trev, we talked about it being a game of emotion and coming out and being focused and locked in and doing what you do. This is where it has to manifest, because if the defense gives up 15 yards in the first half to Florida State and they're just dominating Florida State, it may still only be a 7-0 ball game at halftime. And then Florida State regroups and they're thinking, hey, guys, we played terrible on offense and we're still in this game. You want this game to be like 35-0 at halftime, then this side of the ball has to show up and be ready to play, because they're getting the bigger test. They're getting the bigger challenge, because this is a group of players that athletically can kind of compete with you a little bit. And so that's why when I look at it, guys, starting fast is so important always for Notre Dame. They're getting better at it. They've actually had, 3 of the last 4 games, they've at least got a check for how they started, right? Between Louisville and Stanford, and then this game, or the Navy game, this is a game where the offense has to come out, just bury Florida State. Just put this game away in a hurry. So it's always an important key, but starting fast, Trev, builds on everything we talked about for the first 20 minutes of the show. It's all going to be manifest and by the offense starting fast. If all the things we talked about are true and Notre Dame is ready to do all those things, it starts right here and it'll show right here in the first half of the game.
Yeah, we talked after the Navy game that what we saw from the offense now has to be like Navy's the benchmark for the Final Four games moving forward into the postseason. Because against Navy, the offense, you could argue, played their first 4-quarter game all year. They started fast. They finished fast and strong. And that's something that you have to take into account and something you have to evaluate on Saturday. I mean, Ryan, you've talked about it a lot in post-game shows that Notre Dame's offense is very rhythm-based. And when they're in a rhythm, they're very hard to stop. And when they're not in a rhythm, doesn't take a whole lot to stop them. And there's been defenses that don't have this level of talent that have put Notre Dame in scoring droughts before. Like I've said, the thing that Notre Dame has to work on is not going on these droughts of, hey, they'll rattle off 14 points in this quarter and then they'll get 60 total yards in 2 other quarters. And I firmly believe that you're able to get in that good rhythm by starting fast. And Brian, to your point, that's why it's such a big key. I mean, I know it's a key every single week, but it's a different perspective every time we talk about it.
There's a reason why it matters, because it's Brian, it's to what you said earlier. Football is a game of momentum. Well, what is starting fast about? It's about building momentum. And I've said this before, momentum comes from what? Confidence and execution. Execution comes from a level of confidence in what you're trying to do. As you execute more, your confidence grows. As your confidence grows, you execute better. You build momentum. I mean, that's. You guys want to talk about why we talk about fast start every time? Well, part of it is because this team has never been great at starting fast consistently. But number 2 is because it does that. It does build that momentum, and at the root of momentum is confidence. You're gaining it, they're losing it. That's really what it boils down to, Ryan.
Well, and I would say this is that starting fast is important in this game because, like you just said, Brian, you want to build momentum, but Notre Dame already has all the momentum coming into this game. So, like, you do not want to hand it over to them and give them any form of hope. And I would also, like Trevor, you're 100% right. Like I have completely continued to knock on Notre Dame is a rhythm-based offense. You know who else is a rhythm-based system, though? It's this defense for Florida State, because they need some confidence, man. They need a boost, because I'll tell you what, Patrick Payton is a lot scarier when he's got confidence behind him, right? It's like Darrell Jackson Jr. is a lot scarier when he has confidence. Joshua Farmer, Marvin Jones Jr., the corner Thomas. I'm not even going to try to pronounce his first name. I'm not going to butcher that today. Those players are NFL talents. They're long. They're athletic. They will be drafted in the NFL just based upon what the gifts that God gave to them ultimately, right? But they are only scary because I've seen a couple games where Patrick Payton just didn't look like he wanted to be there. To be honest, he just didn't seem like he wanted to be there. But then there's other
so
games
you watched the North Carolina game? Oh,
man. Well, there's a couple, man. I mean, he didn't look like he wanted to be there in the first game of the season against Georgia Tech. Like, there's just been some games where I just don't think that number 11 wants to ultimately be there. But then there's a couple others where it looks like he's locked in. And usually that's because there's a little bit of confidence. He probably had a play or two early that got him going a little bit. And now he's ready to go. And now he's like, okay, I'm 6'5", 250 and can run like the wind. So, like, let's figure this thing out ultimately, right? But I promise you early in the show, and I'll continue to harp on this, Patrick Payton will stop coming off the line hard consistently if he is shook early on in this game. Darrell Jackson Jr. is the same. This defensive line specifically, they can be a problem for you if you do not, metaphorically speaking, put your foot on their throats. This team could give you some problems athletically. Like, they can. These tackles for Notre Dame, while improving, can have a hard time against Patrick Payton if Patrick Payton is ready to go and is putting his full effort forward. The interior offensive line, Rocco Spindler, can have a tough time against Darrell Jackson Jr. if you allow Darrell Jackson Jr. to get any sort of confidence behind him. So starting fast, put your foot on their throat. Again, metaphorically speaking, I feel like I need to keep saying that because then people take that super literally, but you need to be able to zap any confidence this team can have. Ryan. Well, hopefully
we don't have soft people here. Hey, Ryan, I like building on points, right? So, and giving data for points. So, what's the one game that Florida State won this year? It's a Cal game.
I don't even remember.
Right?
I don't even remember who they beat.
Marvin
Harrison, Patrick Payton Jr. and Marvin Jones Jr. have combined for only 30 pressures this season. They've combined for only 11 total hits plus sacks on the quarterback all season. 7 of those pressures came against Cal. 5 of those, almost half of those hits plus sacks on the quarterback were in that game because they started off well. They came out early. They were getting early pressures, and they just kind of got a little fired up, and they just kind of they went on an attack. Their defense looked way better against Cal than Miami's did. Way better against Cal's than Miami's did. And it came from the D line. And Trev, you and I talked about that matchup yesterday between the tackles and the defensive ends. But in Ryan, you're reiterating the point of why it's so important. You can't let this team get any rhythm early, why you got to put them away early, because you can't let this team who has talent on defense think that they have a shot. Make them not want to be there. And I think that's a big part of it. And you guys talked about the edge pressure. I want to work to key number 2, because key number 2 simply just slides inside. Trev, part of my key isn't protect the quarterback, because we talked about it yesterday. And then Ryan, you just talked about it again in the start fast part, which is about not letting those 2 edges get going. That's obviously important. But in my opinion, just as big of a key, if not a bigger key, because I think running the football is going to be super important in this game, especially early, is you've got to win up the middle. The biggest matchup concern that I have in this game, in any phase of the game, is the matchup of the Notre Dame interior lineman against the Florida State interior lineman. Because, Ryan, you want to talk about guys that sometimes don't want to be there, and then other times they do. And when they do want to be there, they are really good. It's the Florida State defensive tackles, especially Darrell Jackson Jr. Josh Farmer is a really good football player. When these guys are fired up and thinking like, hey, we're making plays, we're doing some things, I mean, that's part of the reason that I felt like they were able to somewhat keep Miami in check, is because they did get off to a decent start, especially up the middle. and they gave Miami some problems. That's the matchup to me, guys, because the run game needs to thrive in this game. Because if you run the ball effectively, Ryan, then we don't have to worry about needing to drop back 25 times and protect against Patrick Payton and Marvin Jones Jr. for 60 minutes, right? And if you can't dominate up the middle against two really big, quality athletic defensive tackles, it's going to make everything else you do more difficult. So dominating up the middle against those two D tackles is huge, because when they get blocked, their linebackers simply aren't good enough to make plays. They're just
with
not.
DJ Lundy out there, especially.
Exactly,
I mean,
exactly.
DJ Lundy is a good football player, man. I actually like DJ Lundy a ton, but like that interior defensive line right now, they need to play above their weight class even more than they typically need to, because the linebackers behind them, like I like the Nicholson kid as like kind of a hybrid Sam type of dude that could play on the line of scrimmage a little bit, but like there is no true middle linebacker in this team right now. There's not. Like DJ Lundy was your best second level defender by a landslide. Like it wasn't even close. So if you're able to negate these interior defensive linemen, Trev, like I would say that your second level is going to have a tough day as well, because you don't have DJ Lundy for this game as well.
Yeah, Notre Dame's interior has struggled from time to time when they've played against skilled interior defensive linemen. You know, I mean, the name that comes to mind off the top of my head is Zeke Biggers against, when they were playing Georgia Tech. They had issues. Yeah, they had issues with interior defensive linemen. But this all kind of feeds back into the main point of this defense will just kind of start to quit if they kind of – it's almost kind of like their pride almost gets hurt a little bit.
Yeah.
Like I think they know at the end of the day that they are a skilled unit. But the second that people are able to have success specifically running the football on them, that's kind of like when they're, this just isn't it today, guys. Like, I mean, we just got done talking about the Cal game, and it was, I mean, they held Cal to 107 yards rushing that day, and then you fast forward to the games where like it was obvious that they just quit. Phil Maffa had a $154 against Florida State in that game. And that's just when teams are able to gouge them on the ground, that's when you can kind of start to see the team's mentalities kind of go.
Look, BC runs for 263 on them, and they win by 15 in a game that wasn't competitive. They hold Memphis to 65 yards. They win by 8. They lose by 8. Competitive game. They hold Cal to 107, 2.9 per carry. They win that football game, right? Like Duke, they only lose by a touchdown. They held Duke to 110 yards, 3.1 yards per carry. Okay, since the opener against Georgia Tech, where they gave up 190 rushing yards and lost by 3. In every game, this is the point total, or the rushing yards total they've given up in every game, and the margin of defeat: 15 points, 263 yards. But again, let's see here, 26-point defeat, 204 rushing yards; 16-point defeat, 265 rushing yards; 22-point defeat, 230 rushing yards; 24-point defeat, 289 rushing yards. It's not hard to draw those correlations, guys, between teams that come out there and run the football on them, and those teams are able to have success on this Florida State team. And that's why defending winning the battle up the middle is so important against those 2D tackles, because if you can do that, like Patrick Payton and Marvin Jones, I worry about as pass rushers. I do not worry about them as run defenders. They don't. That's especially when they're getting run at. They, especially Pat, and that's been really disappointing part about his game this year. He doesn't. He just don't like it, And
care.
so no, and it's that right there. You want to know why this team is underachieved? It's watch their D line. It really is, because when they're playing, hey, they're a pretty good football team. Then it's usually because their defensive line's playing well. When they're not, it's because their defensive line doesn't.
I would also say, like, I think we forget sometimes that these are college kids, right? And sometimes they're not as resilient as like professional athletes, obviously, right? And you got to think of it like this way for the defensive line. They just spent an entire offseason hearing from everyone how great they are, man. And they fed into it. I mean, we have Jim Nagy from the Senior Bowl. We have I forget who's the I forget who the other college football analyst was that was like feeding into it as well. It was like, man, this is the best defensive line in college football, Florida State. And then they got punched in the mouth against Georgia Tech. And I feel like they've had spurts of solid play at times, but like I don't think they've ever recovered from it. They just got an entire months and months and months of people telling them how great they are. Patrick Payton might be a first-round pick. Darrell Jackson Jr. might be a top 50 pick. They get punched in the mouth, and then they're 21 years old. They're 22 years old, and they don't know how to mentally recover from that realization that, like, dude, you guys need to work hard or you're not going to be that type of team.
And I believe at least 2 of them jumped in the portal in the offseason saying, hey, if you don't pay me more, I'm going to leave. So I think their priorities got a little jacked up too this offseason. Sure. So that's going to be a big part of it, guys. Key number 3, I think this is a big one too. Actually, I'm going to do keys 3 and 4 together, fellas, because I do actually think they go together. Key number 4 is go big play hunting. Florida State is not – they give up a lot of big plays on the season. I mean, that's just something that we have seen kind of time and time again. If you look at where they rank defensively, they are 87th in the country in most plays allowed of 30 yards or more. They rank 103rd in the country in most plays of 40 yards or more. This is a team 96th in the country in plays of 20 yards or more. This is a team you can gash. And when you gash them, that especially is when they just kind of like heads go down and you can see all the confidence sucked out of their bodies. All right. It's like you guys remember, did you guys watch Green Lantern? Right? The DC movie with Ryan Reynolds. You know the part where like that thing is just like sucking their souls out of, like, you can see that happening to Florida State's defense when teams are just gashing them. You can kind of see their football souls just like leave their bodies. So big play hunting is a key, and dominating in the middle is going to be a part of that. But the other one too, guys, is force this defense to communicate and make decisions, because when they do that, they are going to give up big plays. They do not communicate well. They do not handle having to make adjustments on the fly very well. So I think there's a few things that I want to see Notre Dame do to take advantage of that and make them, force them to communicate, force them to make decisions. Tempo, right? Mixing up the tempo. I liked Notre Dame had some pace to it against Navy. We saw some, when they've had pace this year, Louisville, they had a little bit of pace early, and this team is good when they work with pace. I want to see them do a lot of pre-snap movement and not like slow little, tight end zips. And I want to see some legit shift, go motion across when they've done some of that stuff, and it's been really effective. I want to see pre-snap movement, do stuff with the running backs where you motion Jeremiah Love out and just do some, and you're not throwing it to him. Maybe you're getting them to react and you're coming back with something different. Post-snap switch routes are going to be big. Stuff, whether it's bunches, whether it's using a motion to get into sort of a stack alignment and do stuff off of it, whether it's just normal post-snap switches, whether it's clear routes, like high-low routes. There's all types of ways where you're doing some sort of post-snap switch. It's not just going like this at the snap. Those are all big things, guys. Mixing up the backfield action, like not always just kind of inside zone, but, doing some jets off of it, do some outside, make sure you're running the ball outside as well a little bit. All that stuff that gets them to go like this, that gets them to talk, that gets them to communicate, is greater opportunities. It's true for every defense, but it's especially true against this defense. It's going to force them into mistakes, Trevor. And if you force them into mistakes and you're handling business up the middle, then guess what? Key number 4, big play hunting. It's going to be a fun day. The feast is going to be there for this offense.
Yeah, I mean, if I were a betting man, which I am, I would be confident in saying that Notre Dame is going to have a couple of big play action shots with what they're going to be able to do on the ground on Saturday. Another thing too, I watched a good amount of film on Florida State's defense, because that's the one. I mean, one, I don't really want to watch film on their offense, but two, on defense, they don't do well playing and tackling in space. Like when they have one-on-one opportunities, they are not great at it. So a lot of their plays that they've given up, those plays of 20, 30, 40 yards, it's not all just, 30-yard passes and it goes 30 yards in the air. A lot of it is, cross routes, underneath routes that just break for longer plays. And Notre Dame was starting to do a good job of that against this last 3-game stretch against Stanford, Georgia Tech, and Navy. So I'm hoping to see more of that as well going into this game, because I think that's going to aid into the big play hunting. But just if you're having success underneath and you're forcing these safeties to start creeping up and everybody starts playing closer to the line of scrimmage, I think that, along with Chris Mitchell had an interesting interview earlier this week where he was saying he loved Florida State and that was his dream school growing up, and they just didn't look at him. It'd be cool for this is the game where we've been asking for him to have that just one deep go ball down the sideline.
200 yards, write it in pen, baby.
Come on. Come on. But that'd be poetic for that to be this game. But I agree. Big play hunting is definitely going to be available on Saturday.
I need it, man. I need it like I need air, guys. I really do. I mean, it's my first game in South Bend this year. It would be great to come out and see something that I've been consistently waiting for since the beginning of the year. More big plays, more explosives. Because I know that the talent is there to be more consistent in that department. Like, you can't sell me on a team that has Jeremiah Love, Jadarian Price. You mentioned Chris Mitchell. I'll throw Jordan Faison into that conversation now that we're starting to see him have some life this past, the past couple of weeks, well, against Navy, I should say. So I know that it's there. And this is a team that, again, when we're talking about a team that could quit, we're talking about a team that is built off of just kind of doing one thing well and not doing a bunch of different things well and having to be able to make adjustments on the fly. That leads to a lot of miscommunication. That leads to a lot of one-on-one opportunities, and hopefully Notre Dame is able to capitalize this week.